that'll be for the benefits of other people who are unable to join us today. As I said earlier on, my name's Ian Cheffy. I'm on the BALID committee and a member of SIL. It's very good to see everybody here today. The outline for the rest of the meeting, it would be something like this. Adam and Farouk are going to speak to us for 20 minutes or so. After that, if there are any immediate questions for clarification or detail of some kind, we'll deal with those immediately after they have spoken. Then we'll move into small discussion groups for 15 minutes or so. We can tease out the ideas more, and above all, I hope we can share our experience around the theme of the day. And then we'll come back together for half an hour or so to have a full discussion, again, sharing our experiences. And I'm sure Adam and Farouk are keen to hear from us what experiences we may have to share with them. So if you've got any questions at all at any point while they're speaking, please put them in the chat box. And then we'll deal with them either immediately afterwards, their talk, or later on when we get back together again. So yes, I'm delighted that Adam and Farouk are able to be with us today. It's a very stimulating topic, and a lot of people have registered for this meeting, which is exciting to see. Adam is the coordinator of education for ALEF, the Swedish NGO that works with adult education in mother tongues, while Farouk is the chair of Imprint Hope, which is the Kurdish NGO working with internally displaced people in Kurdistan. They're going to tell us about their work, but the real focus is on the issue of assessing and measuring impact of the work that we do. And I know that's a topic of great interest to all of us. So let me hand over straight away to you, Adam, and you'll bring in Farouk a bit later on, I think. Thank you, Adam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Let me just see if I can share my screen with you all. There we go. Thank you very, very much, Ian, for inviting me and Farouk to speak. I'm a big fan of BALID and of the Informal Literacy Discussions when I first went earlier this year. So I was really, really excited to be invited to lead a discussion on this topic, and slightly, but also slightly intimidated and slightly embarrassed, because I feel I may quite possibly be the least expert person in the room on this topic. So I would ask for everyone's understanding. What I am going to try and do is describe, I suppose, a problem, a dilemma that I and ALEF, my organization, find ourselves in, some challenges we've encountered, and then we will throw this open to you for your expert commentary, reflection, and ideas. I thought it would be best to begin by saying something about the organization I work for, ALEF. I know some of you already know us quite well. Those who don't, ALEF stands for Adult Literacy and Empowerment Facilitators. It's a Swedish NGO founded back in 2010. And the focus is on non-formal education for adults living in poverty and as adults who have little or no previous education. What ALEF aims to do is to, through literacy education, to empower participants, to help them to improve their own lives and the lives of their families and their communities. And we aim also to strengthen the local development actors. What we do not directly, as ALEF, run literacy projects. What we do is we work with local implementing partners in helping them in designing curriculum, producing teaching materials, training coaches and facilitators and trainers of trainers. And in some cases, we also provide funding. I've lost a lovely. Oh yes, I had a map. I thought I'd lost. So what we do with our partners in different countries is a system in setting up and implementing adult education programs based on what we call the ALEF approach. This is a particular approach to adult literacy and empowerment education. I can't go into all the details here, but to name a few so you know what sort of projects we're working with. It's based on what we call empowerment groups. It's a group of adults working together meeting regularly in their local environment several times a week. It's based on a principle that we call literacy on 4 legs. That is the idea that in every lesson we want to integrate basic skills training in terms of decoding or mathematics, that kind of thing, with skills in applied literacy practices that people will need in their everyday lives, with awareness and analysis of the problems and challenges people in poverty face, and cooperation, training in working together, discussing and taking decisions to solve those problems. All our projects are based in local mother tongue. We always, in our projects, work with natural, as authentic as possible texts from the very first lesson as the basis of lesson and discussion content. That is to say, we avoid working with sort of childlike texts or isolated syllable drills. Each of our programs is unique in terms of the content of discussions, the content of the particular text, because those are meant to reflect local culture and situation, but they all follow a fixed lesson structure, which is more or less the same in every lesson and which is guided in a facilitator textbook. The ALEF, the programs that our partners implement are in general a full program of 3 years, 3 levels of 6 to 7 months of study each, where in the first level, the focus is on basic literacy skills. The second level adds numeracy skills and basic oral skills in a second language. And the third level adds second language literacy and what I've called here organizational skills, that is to say, knowledge of what's involved in setting up for instance, a savings cooperative. I'd include a few pictures to give you an idea of what curriculum materials can look like. On the left hand, some examples of participant materials. Lesson 1 from 2 different countries, and you see it working with sort of real text and sentences from the first lesson. And some examples of the facilitator book, where you see very clearly that you're dealing with quite a fixed lesson structure, where instructions for what questions to ask and how to take the participants through. There's a lot of support to the facilitators. So although the lessons are very unpredictable because the discussion questions are open and texts are composed by participants themselves, there is a basic structure which facilitators can be quickly trained in. We have, since 2010, the partnerships have grown now to 6 different countries currently. There's a little map. Most of these are in sub-Saharan Africa, but we also have this pilot project in Iraqi Kurdistan. We work with different kinds of partners. most are small local organizations. Those can be NGOs, they can be community organizations, it can be a faith-based organization. In Guinea, our implementing partner is a local church. And in Ethiopia, we have partnered with the regional government, who is implementing a large-scale project based with materials based on the ALEF method in the Oromo region of Ethiopia. So we're dealing with quite different kinds of partners with different kinds of capacities. Our beneficiaries are also diverse, live in very different milieu, not just the different cultures of different companies, but from a sort of urban setting in Uganda, where most of our groups are in the Kampala and Tebe region, to a more rural milieu in Togo or in Guinea, to a camp for refugees for internally displaced people in Kurdistan. What our participants have in common is that they live in poverty, most in extreme poverty. A majority are women, in total more than 75%. In several cases, for instance, in Iraq or in Guinea or in Togo, we are dealing with ethnic minorities, and in several cases in Congo and in Iraq, we are operating in a post-conflict zone. I mention all of these because these add to the challenges involved in trying to measure and understand and compare impact, both if you're dealing with people living in poverty and difficult and sometimes slightly hard to reach environments, and environments that aren't always easy to compare. What to say with our big sort of topic about measuring impact? Why should we care? Why do we care about impact at all? And I say for ALEF as an organization, I could think of 4 reasons. One, which particularly interests me as education coordinator, is to learn and improve. We have a method we've developed with our partners over the years because we think it works better than other approaches to adult literacy, which left us frustrated. But knowing how well it works is important to improving. Secondly, desire to understand, to respond to the needs of our participants, what they feel they are getting out of participation in adult literacy groups. The third very important reason is approaching funding partners. We wish as an organization to reach as many people as possible and to be able both to expand the programs we have and to support development of new programs and to provide better, more quality support and training to the partners we already have. All of that requires funding. And large funders these days are very concerned with impact and being able to demonstrate impact, because not unreasonably, at the end of the day, we are asking them to spend money on adult literacy rather than on primary education or on a healthcare education, and not our approach rather than on someone else's. So they want hard data to show that it works. And the fourth and important reason for me is advocacy. I think those of you who know, the people here were working in adult literacy, know that we are working sometimes in a, I don't want to say hostile, but a skeptical environment. Many of the major international agencies, the biggest charitable foundations, tend to be skeptical of adult non-formal education initiatives. The assumption is that primary education and primary healthcare and other things have a far bigger impact on the poorest people. So I think proof that it can work and make a difference is important. What have we done to attempt to analyze the impact of our work and our partners' work? We have basic skills testing for participants, at the end of each course level to assess how much in terms of basic reading and writing and numeracy skills they have gained. We conduct surveys of participants on an annual basis. We have tried interviews and focus groups of participants. And we have a program of continuous follow-up by our implementing partner, whose supervisors, what we call coaches, visit all the empowerment groups every month, where they observe lessons and also speak to the participants and ask for their experiences. All of this over the years has been enough to tell us quite a lot of things. We can say with some confidence that people do learn the basis of reading and writing and numeracy through participation in our progress. We can see differences between some partners for various reasons, but that in the most successful projects is over 90%. We can say with confidence that we have hundreds of stories of people who feel their lives have been changed, that they have been able to start a small business they would not have been able to start, that they have been able to solve problems in their family that they couldn't solve before, or that they are able to provide better help to their children going to school or their children's health than they did before. So we do have a lot that we know and that we try to share as best we can with our funders. But there are limits. There are shortcomings. There is a lack, I would say, of more substantive quantitative analysis. I said we aim to help people improve their conditions of life. And if you were to if someone asks us how great is the effect on poverty, income, or participation in income generating activities, hard to give a quantitative answer. Another shortcoming is a cherry picking of participant voices. We get a lot of the stories that perhaps we want to hear, participants telling us the sort of answers they know we want and the sort of stories we want to publicize. We have a lack of a long-term analysis. What happens to people a year, 2 years, 3 years after they have left a literacy program? Because we know that that's their weak point in many previous literacy programs. And we have a lack of community analysis. What about those who are not participants, but their neighbors, their families, the wider community? It's sort of we are in the process of developing different approaches to solving this problem. One is to try to generate more quantitative data by training our implementing partners to conduct standardized surveys each year of participants with questions designed to measure standard of living, self-esteem, support for children's education, these sorts of things, in order to be able to quantify and compare between projects. But we know there are challenges associated with making use of and interpreting this data. We're finding this out ourselves. We found it out a lot in the past 2 years when we attempted in cooperation with several researchers to apply for a grant from the Funds for Innovation and Development for a design for a randomly controlled trial of the ALEF approach. It gave us a real insight into the difficulties of sort of gold standard quantitative methods, and the tensions between funders' ideas of what counts as gold standard research, researchers' interest, what they want to actually know, what is possible for us in the field practically and ethically, and our resource constraints as an organization and the priorities of our participants. We also learned about the difficulties involved in collaboration between so many different, you have ALEF, we have interested researchers, have a funding body, have our local partners, have participants. So it's a complex equation. We also encountered the problem of measurement, both of identifying both the complexity in measuring something like, for instance, changes in income, where you have to control for any manner of co-founders, and the complexity of the causality. And we also the problem in knowing whether you are measuring what is really most important for our participants. We've got the word empowerment in our name, and we said empowerment is in our aims. And when we interview and talk to our participants, empowerment is often for them not principally or even at all related to getting a job or increasing their income. So another question and another direction we are working in is how we can integrate more qualitative approaches to measuring impact. We already collect stories and testimonies from participants. And I have, you can see some images of the forms we use to collect them and how we use them to communicate with followers. One thing we are working on is is there a possibility to, having over the years, with the help of our partners, actually collected unsystematically hundreds and hundreds of testimonies of participants who have come to us with stories about changes they've made in their lives. If we can compile these stories into a more accessible database, is this something that interested researchers with the right expertise can use to get a better sense of what literacy program participation means for our participants? We also, the third image you can see here is a text composed in the course of an ALEF lesson. In every lesson, participants together compose a text on a subject of interest, on a sort of typical everyday problem, and their opinions on it. We have only recently realized what an important resource this can be in terms of understanding participants' experience and opinions, and are in the process of trying to work with our partners to gather these texts that participants have written, and again integrate them into a database that will be searchable and categorizable, so that an interested researcher could then analyze them. Another approach is to work on a more small-scale direct with conversation, individually in groups, and simply talking to participants. And because in my experience, it is in these conversations one can learn the most surprising things. And it's really on this point that I want to hand over to Farooq to tell us about what he has learned firsthand as a local project leader and as a teacher in a pilot project for implementing the ALEF method for internally displaced people in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. Farooq worked both as a group leader and as the local project manager. He was involved in developing the material firsthand. I put up a little map just there for those of you who don't know. The star is roughly where the camp is located in the triangle border between Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. Some information about the participants who Farooq will tell you more about. Kurdish-speaking Yazidis who fled from ISIS in 2014. And a little picture to, at the bottom, capture the traditional Yazidi culture. They have their ethno-religious minority with their own religion, and pictures at the top to capture the very difficult conditions of life that the displaced Yazidis are living in now, and the situation in which the adult literacy groups were organized. I think I will pause there and hand over to Farooq to tell us more about his experiences there.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam, for your presentation. Hello, everybody. At the beginning, I would like to thank Abel for arranging these meetings, and I would like to thank all of the participation who got the chance to participate as My name is Farouk. I'm from Shingal. Currently live in Bajt Kandala IDP camp in Kurdistan region of Iraq. Since 2014, we live in this camp. At the beginning, I would like to talk a bit about the organizations which I worked with and right now as well. I work with the GHK, but currently I am chairperson of Imprint of Hope organization. GHK was founded by the group of Swedish and Kurdish physicians and humanitarians to provide the emergency relief to the communities attacked by the ISIS, in particular to the Yazidi community, which had been targeted for the genocide and enslavement and displacement for their homes in Sinjar region of Iraq. Our activity was including the emergency relief, primary healthcare, education, women's empowerment, civil society support, and rehabilitation for genocide survivors. The primary health clinic was the center of the holistic program of the community support at GHK Field Center at Bajt Kandala 2 camp, including the Women's Center, adult literacy, youth sport, and social activity rehabilitation. But in 2022, following the sudden death of GHK chairpersons and worsening the fundraising conditions in Sweden, the board informs that employees that GHK will not longer be able to take the responsibility of managing and funding the clinic and other projects at Bajt Kandala camp. In order to ensure the continuation of this essential service, we as a GHK employee, we decide to establish a new local Kurdish organization in order to continue on providing this essential activity to the people in a camp. And we have established the Imprint of Hope organization. The all funding members and governing board of Imprint of Hope are IDPs. And we have been serving the Bajt Kandala camp for 9 years. I'm sure that maybe you do not have a lot of information about the camp and about the Kurdistan and Yazidi. That's why I would like to get a chance to talk a bit about the situations, how it is, and why we have decided to have the literacy project here in this camp, and especially for the peoples in this camp. Bajt Kandala is located in the Hope Governorate in northwest of Kurdistan region of Iraq. It's close to the Syrian and Turkish borders. The camp populations are the member of Yazidi, the ethno-religious minority displaced from Sinjar area following the ISIS attack in summer 2014. They have been forced to flee their homes and seen relatives murdered and enslaved, and some camp residents have themselves endured a longer period of the captivity at the hands of ISIS. According to the latest data from UNHCR, the populations of this camp is 8,550 individuals in 1,694 households. The 46 of the residents of this camp are under 40. 9 years after the beginning of genocide, 95% of families still live in this temporary tent, which is designed at least for maximum of 3 years. The camp is in isolated locations, far from all major settlements, and thus from access of the employment, hospitals, mental health, and social service. The experience of genocides and the history of discriminations against the Yazidi also that deters many camps residents from the accessing those services and the opportunities which do exist. The camp residents avoids the hospital, education, and many other essentials, the activity. due to the transport costs and the fears of discriminations, and also the expense of the treatment. Only small minority are in a full time of employment. The only source to paid incomes of most families is low paid sessions, cushions, agricultural labors. The average of monthly household income, we can say, is about 200, 250, which is a very low. The most of households, they rely on a borrowing and charitable the assistance to offer a food and other the basic needs. 54 of the households reported at the list members with a chronic illness. Since 2014, the expressed aim of both the Kurdish and Iraqi authority, as well as the international organizations, has been is to facilitate the safe return of IDPs to the Sinjar's province as soon as possible. The IDP camps were designed as temporary, and their immediate closure has been announced on a year basis. The camp residents have been prevented from the constructing the safes and more permanent dwellings to the replace increasing and rigid stands, which are very inexpensive, providing the poor protections from the extreme climates and from violence of fires. This believes that temporary displacement is a pilot by the failures to resolve the security situation in Shingal. The military activity by the group, including the many different groups which are there right now in Shingal, and they are forced to continue the obstacles of stability and security there in Shingal. The government forces have been demonstrated neither well and nor able to maintain a peace. In 2020, the Sinjar agreement has been done between the two governments, but so far there's nothing has been changed. Moreover, in despite of the recognitions that the crimes against Yazidi continuous genocides have been and thus responsible for the 24 mass graves and kidnappings and money has been in a large, moreover than thousands of women still in the ISIS captivity. And right now, the situations in a camp, it's still the same, and there is no a change. And about the literacy, as the Adam talk more about the impact, I don't would like focus on the impact because it's same, and we are working and partnering with the ALEF to provide the literacy project in this camp and for the pupils in the camp. But the Yazidi community has a low levels of education and literacy compared to others in Iraq. There are many causes that they have a low levels, including the lack of the provisions due to the discrimination, isolation, persecution. There also poverty and the cultural tradition. All of these reasons was the main problems that the Yazidi, and especially the women's, more than the men's, that they have a very low level of education. And that's why, and in addition to other reasons of the situations that I have mentioned before, we have decided in a partner with the ALEF to provide the literacy, the project for the people in this camp. And we have used the same method, which is the ALEF method for designing the curriculum, but in the Kurmanji language. most of our participants who have joined the course, it was their first times to get the chance to access to the education, and they have been there's very made a bigger changes in their life, and according to the results that we have measured and the report and the focus groups interview, there was the many changes that they have been added to their lives, including they were able to help their children with the educations, and they also been very confident about themselves when they are visiting the public place. They are able to read and write and the basic literacy. And in addition to that, it was like a chance for them, because the camp, the situation here in a camp, it's different than to live in a city, and the most of them, they are spending a lot of their time in the tent, and this activity and this course of literacy, it was a chance for them to get out from their homes and to join this activity. It has its mental effect on them, not just the educational. And most of them, they have mentioned this during the interview and the focus group that we have talked to them. So that's why we have would like to have a plan for a long term of the literacy project, not just a 1 or 2 courses, because most of them that they have been joined in the course, they would like to continue with the educations, not just for 6 months or 1 year, and then they stop. The most of them, they are very motivated to learn more and to get a chance to not just learn the Kurmanji, but also the other language as well. So this was the like introductions, and I would like to thank all of you. If you have any questions, I will be glad to answer you.
Thank you very much indeed, Farooq. It's really important for us to understand the situation that you're working in and the many challenges that you're facing. So I do want to congratulate you for all that you're doing. I will go into breakout groups in just a moment. Just quickly, does anybody want to raise a simple question for clarification or detail? I didn't see anything particularly in the chat box. Speak now or forever hold your peace. There'll be opportunities in general discussion time in a moment. Okay, right. Let's move on. As we go into breakout rooms for maybe 15 minutes, it would be good to focus on a couple of questions to concentrate our minds, as it were. What is your experience, your own experience of assessing and measuring the impact of your work? And how have you measured the impact of your work? Catherine will put those 2 questions into a message that will go into the breakout rooms. So, Catherine, would you like to put us into
and active, because we, at least, like I said, ALEF very much want to avoid that sort of short-term project approach, a sort of fly-in, tell people how to do something and leave approach, because it's, I mean, very ethically problematic and doesn't work very well. So we always try to develop long-term partnerships. We have partner organizations we've worked with for 10 years, for 5 years, and we speak in terms of a program. I said a 3-year program for literacy, and that's true in the sense that the ALEF groups meet usually over 3 courses during 3 years, but the aim is that those groups will continue then autonomously after that. Part of the course is that they learn how to build community organizations, and will then found usually a savings cooperative of their own, where they will continue to meet. And depending on the program, sometimes those autonomous groups still get some follow-up and support from our local partners to see how they're doing, to give them some advice, and to follow them. But they're on the so the aim is to our aim is for long-term partnerships always, and something that can be sustainable. That is a big clash with funders who often want, in terms of saying, oh, no, we don't fund ongoing programs. You have to be doing something new, and it has to last 1 year or 2 years, and then you have to give us the results. So that kind of project approach is a big clash for us.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, in our group, we talked about materials and the need for developing, practicing materials. But my question was to Farouk when he was sharing. Then I heard about children, but I would have liked to hear in terms of infrastructure within the refugee camp, the school situation, like how many schools are there, how accessible are those schools to the children, what happens there, have they developed materials in their mother tongue, and how do they cross over to the language of wider communication? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. In a Budget Kandala camp, the camp where we were providing the literacy project, there are 2 school buildings in this camp, and both the schools, the government are running these schools. But there are many children who are studying in these schools. So that's why through all days, the students only got 2 chances. 2 hours, a chance for 2 hours to go to the schools because of the limited space that they have in the school. So each schools, there are 3 shifts where the students, they are coming, and they are dividing between the primary and the middle schools and the high school. And the other students, they are going to some other areas on the village near to the camp to learn. But in regarding to the teachers, some of them, they are camp residents itself, but there are also the very few teachers who are able to teach the students. And it was the other big challenges, especially at the beginning of displacement in 2015 and 16, to get the teachers to the school. It was very difficult, but now the situation is a bit different, but still there is a few times for children to be in a schools, just 2 hours per day.
Am I right, Farouk, that you have one group? There is one group who are following the Iraqi curriculum, which is then in Arabic, and another group who follow the Kurdish curriculum, which is then majority in Kurdish. So there's kind of two school systems at once.
Yeah, exactly. For all like IDP camps, the curriculum is different. About the half of students, they are in Arabic schools, and half of them, they are in Kurdish schools. So for sure, the system also is different. The teachers are different. And even some of the schools, some of the students, they have only the chance to go to the schools, the Arabic one, not the Kurdish, the only 3 days in a week, and each a day about 2-3 hours per day. So it's very little for them because of there is no space, there is no school building in a camp.
Farouk, did you try something like that? My experience is that in some part of Afghanistan and some part of Pakistan, we tried to develop literacy skills through like Quran. Those people who can read Quran, the letters are the same, phonics are the same. It's just a script. The writing history is different. So they quickly learn. Hardly they took 1.5 and 2 months to learn literacy, because it's just a transfer of, language skills. So did you try something like that? Like we did it in Persian, we did it in Pashtun, and it's so quick, because I thought it's a mental block. Once you finish this mental block, they easily can recognize words. Something like happened in your experience?
When we started at the beginning, most of them, in regarding to literacy, not about the schools and the students, for our literacy growth, all of our participants were women, and they were adults. So we have started with the basic literacy for them. Each lessons, they were learning a new letter. So they had a chance to go to review in their homes, and also they were came back. So there was, according to the ALEF method, it was there was a review for the last lessons, and we have made the review. So they were able to learn during this time, because it was not too lot for them to have, and especially for adults, it's difficult for them to teach them a lot of letters, a lot of words in a 1 day for them, and especially for those who have never got a chance to go to the schools, and they are old in ages, and they have a lot of work also to do in the home. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Who else would like to come in?
So in our group, Ian, I want to just say something. In our group, we discussed about the idea of impact. And as Adam said, it's really difficult to quantitatively, show some results of the impact especially for the funders. But we had some little stories from our group, from different contexts, that it shows that there are some impacts in people's, especially in the community level, and especially in the family and the work level, where people always, they have impact on the program. As one of our participants was saying, people come and say, teach me what I need, not teach me what the ministry or what the book says I need. And
Yes.
those are little things that has impact. And we see some people dramatical changes in their lives after taking the literacy classes. Though it's only, the literacy courses are really short. Like in Afghanistan, it's only for 9 months. And after 9 months, they are like, okay, what's next? There's no next for that for the time being. Yeah, so we were talking about the impact of literacy on people's social activities and social life.
I think it was also interesting to hear from Hélène about the gathering all of these anecdotal stories and the power that they have collectively for fundraising purposes. And I think that's something that all of us can learn, because fundraisers are usually obsessed with figures and quantitative impact. But if you collect enough stories, as Hélène was telling us, then actually you can make that impact.
If I can follow up on that one, Mary, Mari Yasunaga from UNESCO has had to leave already, but in our group, she was very much in favor of the approach that you in ALEF are taking to collect all the stories together into a database. And she felt that the quantity of material that you will gather together there will be very telling in itself. So she was very happy to see that. She also made a comment about the importance, when talking about cherry picking, the importance of cherry picking people who have not succeeded. And there are such people, of course. Yeah. So those were a couple of comments from UNESCO. Chris, please come in.
Yeah, I mean, in our group, I think we also talked a little bit about communication and how do you communicate impact. And I think that's where the maybe different literacies in terms of impact measurement and what counts as data or what counts as valid data, for instance. Because yes, numbers are important, and perhaps you need to, I mean, there was one example by Gary earlier about, being able to share that with government and funders, etc. But these stories that you gather also are effective in other ways. It might not be, maybe if your funder wants numbers, it might not make sense to them. But in terms of advocacy building, for instance, I think we've seen how stories of people are more powerful than the numbers. I mean, this is what I see, at least in educational campaigning. I work with youth activists, and a lot of them would use individual stories of individual people to prove the point. And that has a particular power, and that is a particular form of impact. I just submitted an impact proposal yesterday, and we were told, how do you document? We were not asked to document numbers, but testimonies and quotes of people on how they're willing to use this particular research project for their own lives. So I think we need to be a bit more, I feel like, yes, there is the dominance of the numbers, but I think it's also shifting in a way now, the way we talk about impact and the way we communicate impact for particular purposes, I think for different purposes. So that's, yeah.
Catherine, do you want to follow on from there?
Yes. I wasn't in a group, so I'm just sharing from my own experience. But I have appreciated the opportunities to use tools like outcome mapping, outcome harvesting, and most significant change, which certainly focus on the story, but also focus on comparing, contrasting, and trying to identify the themes and the core ideas that emerge from these stories, and enabling community facilitated conversations around these stories and the evidence that arises out of them, that contribute to both formative evaluation, if you want to use that word, but a formative approach, as well as maybe the more summative approaches that donors want to learn about. So I've appreciated some of the kind of qualitative tools that are available, or approaches, maybe better than tools.
One of the, I'm not speaking now from the group, but one of the things that interests me is the interrelatedness between adults achieving literacy and the impact of their literacy on their children. So not only on the community, the adult community, but actually the intergenerational impact of literacy, adult literacy.
Thank you, Mary. Timothy, would you like to come in now?
I just want to say there's a lot of strength in filming, and Chris has made me think about that, because there's an organization I worked with, and they filmed the learners before they joined the class. And then after they went through the class, they went and filmed them again at home, and the differences were vivid. So I think we also need to embrace the strength of filming. Thank you.
Yeah. Adam, if I can ask you a question of my own, I mean, can you say a little bit more about the responses you get from different donors and funding agencies. I'm assuming that you're in contact or have been in contact with different funding agencies. Can you say a little bit more about what they're expecting and how much you can enter into dialogue with them about the evidence that you've got?
I say it depends slightly on the kind of agencies, the funders you're working with, what level, because there's definitely some, for instance, foundations that we have worked with, we've had a sort of long-standing relationship with, who have supported us for a long time, where there's more sort of, I guess, we have greater openness to provide different kinds of stories, and we can tell them what evidence there is. I think the biggest challenges for us have been either where we are working with government funding. We have one program where we get Swedish government aid funding, and there are quite sort of complicated criteria that they don't always decide on themselves, that we then have to submit to and then submit our partner organizations to. And when working with prospective donors, particularly large foundations which have a sort of more pro forma approach, where often, particularly if you're asking for larger amounts and asking for amounts to scale up a project, there is an expectation of either existing hard quantitative data or a plan for generating quantitative data as part of the scaling up. I don't know if, I wonder if my colleague Ebba is here, who has more direct contact with our funders than I do. I wonder if, Ebba, you want to add anything?
Yes, yeah, I agree. It depends a lot on the funders, but I also think that one problem, but that's like the initial part as well, that I think a challenge for us is to communicate the problem. We have a really good solution, but we often realize that the funders don't realize how big of a problem illiteracy is and what kind of circumstances our participants live in. And then it's hard to really explain how good this is, because there are there are still around 770 million illiterate adults, and we think that's too much. So I would say that is a problem. And then they kind of, maybe they, I get the feeling that a lot of funders are like, oh, we want to work with gender. But then exactly how do you explain the problem and the solution and the results in relation to that? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Katie, come in. And you're muted.
Thanks. I think a couple of other things that sort of spring on from here, and I've really enjoyed the conversation and the presentations and the small groups, and it links with quite a lot of my work at the moment. One of the things is about speed of change, and donors, we might be really chuffed if someone over one learning year, and I loved seeing your 3 years as well, over one learning year, someone has perhaps got used to the whole thought that literacy is open to them, and that they might be able to read a sign that's on a shop front, or whatever, or write their own name, and the amount of time that it takes for that whole process of moving from someone who self-identifies as non-literate, and that I will never be able to write my own name, I'll always have to use my thumb, to, oh my goodness me, I could write my own name here, and that, and communicating with the donor that it's actually okay for that to have taken a season. Yeah. That literacy classes, they've got to wait until until the harvest is done before you can start the classes, and they've got to stop before the rainy season because you're then into the cultivation season. So you've got a limited time, and in that one season, people can move a substantial distance, but yet if you start measuring it on your flipping literacy levels, you sort of think, what have they been doing all this time? So sorry, a minor rant there. And also that excitement when you start the next year, and someone, and I've experienced this recently, going back into classes which have shut down for a while during cultivation and storms and all sorts of stuff, and people are coming back and are saying, oh look, I can still write my name. And that again is something which is a real achievement. So I think to some extent there's something about how can we communicate the excitement. And I love the idea of film that was mentioned earlier again. Gosh, help it, time's gone on. One other little point about trust. I think this is, where's my evidence here? I don't know, just a million years. I think donors are more likely to trust our stories when we also have shared our learnings and our, I use the word failures, but where things haven't gone right, etc. Why should a donor just hear good news stories and then believe and extrapolate that those are appropriate right across the 23 communities you're working in? So I think that that sort of increased, oh my goodness, this class didn't work, I wonder why that was. Or these individuals, it hasn't worked, let's talk about the why. But somehow able to balance that with saying, yeah, but here and here and here, we've got these great stories. I'll shut up now. Yes.
We very much share your enthusiasm and joy, Katie, at just seeing these small differences that make so much difference. And thank you for sharing the frustrations as well as the joys. Very briefly, I'm going to just give the word to Adam to see if he'd like to respond briefly, and then I'll hand over to Chris to round off our meeting. Over to you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Ian, and thank you so much, everybody. There's so much sort of food for thought in these comments, and I'd like to follow up with. And I thought Katie's last point was a really good one. And for me, one takeaway of this process is kind of how can we learn from the stories we have and our experiences to perhaps use that to generate the kind of data people want. I want to take a small example because that I learned from interviews with participants and from the stories that were told is that this kind of self-esteem that you're talking about was for so many the most important outcome. That I can feel proud of myself, that I'm a literate person, that I know that if I have to, I can sign a form or I can read the sign. And so one thing we've done, if you like, I mean, in a way cynically, is now, you know, on all the sort of annual surveys, we have sort of a set of questions that they answer every year about self-esteem. Do you consider yourself the sort of person who, and 3 or 4 different questions to try and capture that. The hope being that when people are surveyed again and again, you capture that in a slightly more sort of packageable, quantitative way, that kind of impact, which we might not have thought about in the beginning, that some, you know, is so important. And I think another takeaway from the group I was in was the difficulty of combining the priorities of different kinds of funders that you might work with, or if you're working with governments which have their own priorities and their own measurements. And we talked a bit about ALEF's experience in Ethiopia, where we have, exactly as Katie said, been trying to be open with funders about and learn from, you know, mistakes and how we can do that kind of cooperation better. The one thing I'd just like to say, on a leaving note, I've written my email in the chat, and there was so much that I didn't have a chance to discuss and that we haven't had a chance to go into in the conversation today. Please very much encourage anyone who would like to keep up that contact, keep the conversation going, to drop me an email. And also know that a lot of what I was and Farouk have been talking about today are works in progress. For instance, the database of stories, of testimonies, and of participant-created text is in its infancy. So anyone who is interested in advising on that, or who might be interested or know someone who is interested in making use of that database as it develops, do please get in touch, and I'd be really interested to discuss that.
Thank you, Adam, very much indeed. And thank you, Farouk, as well. Let me hand over to Chris to round off our meeting. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Ian. And really just to thank Adam and Farouk for their time and for the insightful discussions that you've helped stimulate through your presentation. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, morning, or evening. And of course, thank you to everyone who has who is here. And with Informal Literacy Discussions, it's different every time because of the people who come, and we have this opportunity to really share our own experiences. Maybe just to share with you some links. I have put in the chat some links related to BALID, our website. We have a blog as well, which is open to everyone. If you'd like to write down some of the insights that you've gained today, you can do so in our blog. We have space for that for only 750 words, and we share that across our networks. You could also join BALID as a member and continue these types of conversations. I mean, there's so many offshoots to this. I mean, the interest on measurement might be a good sort of community of practice within BALID, for instance, because I know that there's a lot of interest around this topic. So please join us as an individual member or as an institutional member. Our next event is our AGM, our annual general meeting. It's not just a boring formal event, but there will be an opportunity to hear from our members from different parts of the world. So BALID is based in the UK, but we have memberships from different parts of different countries. So we'll hear from some of the projects of our partners during the AGM. That's 10:30 to 12. It's going to be hybrid, so there's an online and an in-person. If you happen to be in London at that time, you can join us in person. And finally, if you want to receive any news from BALID, please send an email to secretary@balid.org.uk. That's Catherine, whom you can see on your screen. So she can add you to our mailing list and you can hear news from us. So again, thank you very much for being here. It's been a very wonderful session. And of course, thanks to Ian, before I forget, thanks to Ian for the masterful chairing, and for everybody else who have been instrumental to making this session a success. Right. Thank you very much. And I'll see you all soon at some point. Have a good rest of your day. Evening.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all for the meeting. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Astrid.
Thank you,
Nice to see you.
Astrid.